Hello, everyone. Could I please ask that you take your seats? Thank you. I think we're going to make a start. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Monique Hitter. I am the CEO of Legal Aid New South Wales. I would like to welcome everyone to the launch of the National Legal Aid Private Practitioner Census report. I'd like to acknowledge that we are on Gadigal land. We're on Gadigal land, and I would like to acknowledge the elders and the traditional custodians of this land, past and present. And I would like to acknowledge First Nations people here with us today. We have a sizable component of attendees at the launch today who are online, and I would like to acknowledge all of the Aboriginal lands that they are on and pay my respect to those elders and traditional custodians past and present, and acknowledge that all of those lands have never been ceded. Legal aid commissions and our private practitioner colleagues work closely with First Nations people, and this is highlighted in the report that we're launching today. And part of our ongoing commitment around better supporting clients and private practitioners is to include prioritising actions and strategies that support the provision of culturally safe environments and culturally appropriate and safe legal services to First Nation communities right across Australia. I warmly welcome everyone to the launch today and particularly recognise Dr. Hugh McDermott, Parliamentary Secretary to the New South Wales Attorney General, Mark Woods, Chair of the Access to Justice Committee of the Law Council of Australia, and my fellow Legal Aid Directors and CEOs, John Borsick from Legal Aid ACT, Anne-Marie Lumsden from the Legal Services Commission of South Australia, and Toby Hemming, who is a week and a half into his role as CEO at VLA. Welcome, Toby. Unfortunately, the Attorney General, the Honourable Mark Dreyfus KC, is unable to attend in person, but he will provide a recorded message as part of the launch. So now I would like to invite the Interim Chair of National Legal Aid, Dr. John Borsick, to provide some background on how the Private Practitioner Census has come about. Thanks, John.
Thank you all, and good afternoon. It's delightful to be here today. And thank you, Monique, for that introduction. I too would like to pay my respects to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. As I said, I'm very pleased to be here today and part of the launch of this groundbreaking and important report. This report is a first for Australia and only the second ever census globally. The UK released their census in 2022. Private practitioners are in many ways the engine room of legal aid service delivery in particular. They undertake more than 70% of all the legal aid grant-funded work throughout Australia. But we have never before had a national picture of who private practitioners are, what their experience is, what they value as part of the work, and what frustrates them the most. So, National Legal Aid commissioned the Social Policy Research Centre of University of New South Wales, over there, to conduct a national private practitioner census. And with the assistance of the advisory group with representatives of all the legal aids around Australia and the Law Council of Australia, there was a census undertaking with over 1,000 responses. This is an excellent response rate, and you ought to be congratulated. Natasha Cortis and Megan Blackland, the authors of the report, will take you through the findings in a moment, but I just want to spend a bit of time reflecting on the broader outcomes of the report. Firstly, not only did we receive over 1,000 responses, but many of those surveyed took the time to provide detailed feedback about what they value in their work and also made considered suggestions as to what we can do to improve and make the work easier. We are truly grateful for this and aim to ensure that we can action most of these suggestions in some ways. We'd like to action many of them, of course. The overall theme of the report is that private practitioners really value legal aid work. And there's a tremendous history about the value that legal aid, private practitioners provide and to the community through for 70, 80 years. They value the contribution to community that they are making. They value supporting and getting outcomes for clients and making a difference. Many of the private practitioners would undertake more legal aid work. It is just that there are some barriers to this. Again, Natasha and Megan will go through the findings in more detail, but unsurprisingly, the main barrier is under-resourcing. Most of the launch today will be aware that the federal government announced the finalisation of the National Access to Justice Partnership Agreement late last year, which included a commitment of $3.9 billion over 5 years and an increase of $800 million from the previous agreement, the National Legal Assistance Partnership. National Legal Aid welcomes this funding, particularly as it provides ongoing certainty to most existing programs and increased funding for our legal assistance partners. Unfortunately, the envelope did not stretch far enough to allow for expansion of our services, nor does it provide funding to increase private practitioner fees. We know that increasing private practitioner fees is a priority. The NLA analysis via the Justice of the Brink report outlines how the fees have not kept pace with either the CPI or the wage price index over the past decade, and were already low 10 years ago. A comment which reflects a discussion I just had a moment ago. We knew anecdotally that the under-resourcing of private practitioner fees is resulting in loss of lawyers undertaking legal aid work, particularly in rural and remote areas. Following this census, we know that up to 30% of lawyers plan to stop doing legal aid work in the next 5 years. This means that we have at most 5 years to address the current and ongoing loss of private practitioners, and if we don't address this, by 2030, we will be looking at a failed legal aid system where there simply aren't enough lawyers available to deliver these services. So, we need to continue to work with the federal and state and territory governments to address this under-resourcing. Where are they? They're here. Yes, hello there. Yes, we need to keep working with you. And indeed, we've been talking about that quite a bit today. All legal aid commissions either have or are reviewing their fees arrangements within existing funding. For example, Victoria Legal Aid and Legal Aid ACT recently raised their family law fees, and others, such as Legal Aid New South Wales, are also reviewing their fee structure, including looking at how ongoing increases can be maintained, even though it's limited to CPI increases. We've had to put up these fees. This may mean that we have to do less, but ultimately our priority must be to maintain an available workforce in order to provide any services at all, particularly in rural and remote areas. And we are calling on the Standing Council of Attorney Generals to commit to a review of legal aid commission fees and grant structures and identify funding options that can support a greater commitment of resources. We are committed to finding solutions to this that help legal aid provide access to justice for people experiencing disadvantage. These are our clients. These are the people in poverty. And we need to support and commit to the workforce of private lawyers undertaking this work. We are looking forward to working on this as a priority over the next 5 years and possibly longer. And finally, on behalf of the National Legal Aid and the 8 Legal Aid Commissions, I would like to acknowledge the enormous contribution of legal aid private providers, private practitioners, and sincerely thank them for their commitment and contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Our next speaker, the Commonwealth Attorney General, Mark Dreyfus KC, couldn't make it in person, unfortunately, but we will now hear from him with a pre-recorded speech.
Thank you very much for the invitation to launch National Legal Aid's Legal Aid Private Practitioners Census 2024 report. I'm sorry I was not able to be with you in person, but I'm delighted I'm able to address this event today. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I join you from, the Ngunnawal people, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I also extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. I also acknowledge Michael Daly, MP, Attorney General of New South Wales, Dr. Natasha Cortis, Associate Professor at the University of New South Wales Social Policy Research Centre and co-author of the report, and Catherine McKernan, Executive Director, National Legal Aid. Legal assistance providers work tirelessly to provide access to justice and equality before the law for all Australians. Through the delivery of essential frontline services, legal assistance providers support a fairer, more equal and efficient justice system. Legal aid is essential to ensuring the most vulnerable members of our community have greater equity in our justice system. More than 70% of all legal aid grant-funded work is undertaken by private legal practitioners. The Legal Aid Private Practitioners Census 2024 outlines the successes and challenges of private practitioners who contribute their time and expertise to assist legal aid clients. Over 1,000 private practitioners from each state and territory contributed to the census report, sharing their experience in delivering legal aid. The work of private practitioners who undertake legal aid work is crucial to ensuring that people experiencing disadvantage have access to legal representation and access to justice. I know many private practitioners deeply value legal aid work as an opportunity to make a real difference in people's lives. The report acknowledges that legal aid work is a valuable opportunity to gain hands-on experience with a diverse range of challenging cases. For new practitioners, it allows them to refine their skills, develop expertise, and build experience they will carry through the rest of their legal careers. For more experienced practitioners, legal aid work is an opportunity to give back to the profession and the community through sharing of legal knowledge and expertise. Many practitioners have years, even decades, of engagement with legal aid. Almost a quarter of the practitioners surveyed for the census report have been providing legal assistance for more than 20 years, an incredible contribution to access to justice in this country. Their commitment to the inherent value of this work is evident in the feedback highlighted in the report, that amidst the challenges of delivering legal aid, so many private professionals find it a highly satisfying way to contribute to clients and communities. In particular, more than 3/4 of respondents reported that the ability to make a difference in people's lives is one of the most satisfying aspects of the work. That difference is tangible because they see it firsthand. Rural and remote areas are a national priority group for legal assistance services. The census report highlights the commitment of practitioners to the delivery of legal assistance wherever it is needed. Over 60% of private practitioners work with people seeking legal assistance in rural and remote areas. This is not without challenges. The report found that many practitioners have travelled extensively to provide legal assistance. Nearly 40% of respondents have travelled more than 200 kilometres one way to deliver services. Private practitioners offer an integral, holistic service to rural and remote legal aid clients, a nexus between the legal profession and community services and other supports. Clients often present with complex personal needs that can affect their engagement with the legal system. Connecting with other support services is critical. Private practitioners grapple with these complexities. To ensure greater support to practitioners in the legal aid sector, in September, $3.9 billion of ongoing Commonwealth funding for legal assistance was announced as part of a new partnership agreement. The National Access to Justice Partnership is set to commence on the 1st of July this year and is the largest investment from the Commonwealth in legal assistance ever. The partnership replaces the current $2.4 billion National Legal Assistance Partnership and aims to provide substantial funding to every part of the legal assistance sector. $800 million of new funding will be provided to the legal assistance sector under the partnership. This funding increase is the most significant new Commonwealth investment in access to justice in over a decade. This investment forms an ongoing commitment to the legal assistance sector. It's an agreement that was created in collaboration with all legal assistance providers. The National Access to Justice Partnership brings all providers of legal assistance together under one agreement to create a stronger, more sustainable and collaborative sector. Through the partnership, $1.785 billion will be provided to legal aid commissions, an increase of $342 million or 24% compared to the previous agreement. I'd like to close by taking a moment to recognise and commend the work of all private practitioners in the legal assistance sector. Your dedication and commitment to delivering access to justice is inspiring and critical to upholding access to justice across Australia. I would also like particularly to acknowledge the service of women who form the majority of private practitioners working with legal aid. Women who have competing priorities, responsibilities and obligations, all while delivering legal aid to vulnerable Australians. I extend a special thanks to National Legal Aid, who collaborated with the University of New South Wales Social Policy Research Centre to produce this report. Their work has illuminated the lived experience of private practitioners, providing insight into the complexities, challenges and rewards of this crucial work. I thank you for inviting me to address you all today. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Can I now introduce Dr. Hugh McDermott, Parliamentary Secretary to the New South Wales Attorney General, for his reflections on the report.
Well, thank you very much. It's lovely to be here, and good afternoon, everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to join my colleagues to discuss and launch this important survey. Also, I'd like to acknowledge the hundreds of practitioners who are online watching this, obviously too busy to be able to make their way into the CBD today in Sydney, though I know everyone here is also extremely busy as well as we work towards recognising this survey, but the impact which legal aid has nationally across this country. I'd like to begin firstly by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, their elders past, present and emerging, and any Aboriginal people that are here in our audience today. I'd also like to acknowledge Robert Hoyles, the Acting CEO of Legal Aid New South Wales, and Catherine McKiernan, the Executive Director of National Legal Aid, for their work to help develop the National Legal Aid Private Practitioner Consensus Report 2024, and their ongoing commitment to equitable and affordable access to justice in our community. I'd also like to acknowledge our colleagues from Legal Aid in South Australia and Victoria who have joined us today here, as well as John Bosing from National Legal Aid. Thank you so much. Thank you for all the work you all do, for the work in our community and for being part of this important survey. I would like to acknowledge Natasha Cortis, the Associate Professor at the University of New South Wales Social Policy Research Centre, and Megan Blaxland, the co-authors of this report, for their authorship and efforts to conduct this investigation and compile this very important report for legal aid in Australia. I'd also like to acknowledge the contribution of Mark Dreyfus, SC, who's the Commonwealth Attorney General, and of course my colleague, the Honourable Michael Daly, MP, the Attorney General of New South Wales, who sends his best wishes and acknowledgement. I will speak to Michael again this afternoon after this. We are very much aware of what is in this survey and the discussions associated with that. And I'm actually seeing Mark Dreyfus tomorrow at Parramatta, so I will be sitting discussing it with him as well. He doesn't know that yet, but he will tomorrow. Though they both could not attend today's event, I know they both send their warmest regards and gratitude for the dedication that each and every one of you show to achieving fair outcomes for members of perhaps the most vulnerable people in our communities. As you already know, private practitioners play the critical role of providing legal aid work and supporting the justice system in New South Wales, and in fact across Australia. They broaden the opportunities for disadvantaged clients to access legal representation. Private practitioners deliver more than 70% of the over 150,000 legal aid grants approved each year nationally. Their work is crucial to achieving fair and just outcomes for every member of our community. They are the cornerstone of a fair and efficient justice system in Australia. According to the 2023-24 annual report, legal aid funded private lawyers act in over 34,000 matters per year. Legal aid private practitioners offer affordable, culturally considerate and sensitive and accessible legal services. Legal aid private practitioners are a vital component of our justice system. They ensure that every individual can access trusted and affordable legal representation. Without them, many of our most vulnerable citizens would be left exposed before the courts and the law. The most disadvantaged of our community would be unable to access a lawyer. Too many people would be forced to either to self-represent or to be simply denied the opportunity to seek legal advice. And the justice system would experience overwhelming delays. Private practitioners play an essential role in providing access to justice for people in remote and regional areas as well. Unfortunately, many regional and remote areas do not have a legal aid office. Private practitioners in these access areas bridge the gap by providing equitable access to a lawyer. And these practitioners cater to a high demand, with 34% of legal aid clients in New South Wales located in remote and regional areas. On Monday, I go to Wagga. I've just been on a parliamentary hearing to do with juvenile incarceration, especially Indigenous community, and access to justice. I've been to Burke, I've been to Kempsey, I've been to Broken Hill. Without legal aid practitioners in these places, so many more children would be incarcerated. So many people from the Indigenous community would be incarcerated. Legal aid private practitioners provide an incredible service for those regional and remote areas, for the challenges which we are all facing as a community to try and break those cycles of violence and crime in those areas. The role of private practitioners is quite all-consuming when it comes to legal aid, whether it be working as an independent children's lawyer to advocate for the best interests of a child in a separation, or representing a client in a criminal law matter. Private lawyers are reaching the farthest corner of our state and in fact our nation to ensure timely and just outcomes are available for all Australians. Access to justice is a fundamental pillar of our democratic society. Without the vital work of that legal aid and private practitioners perform, members of our community would experience greater barriers to justice. This would have direct effects rippling across every sector and affecting legal, economic, and social outcomes. Legal aid commissions help to alleviate the heavy lifting to support more inclusive access to justice. Now, I'm very excited to be here today for the release of this first national survey of private practitioners. This is very much the evidence we need going forward. Today's launch marks a milestone for the sector, shining a light on the integral role they play in supporting the delivery of legal aid. More than 1,000 private lawyers shared their experiences delivering legal aid services. Their stories narrated a workforce that values the opportunity to contribute to clients and communities and to make a real difference in people's lives. I thank all of them for their contribution to the survey. The survey findings showcase a workforce committed to achieving justice for all people. 38% of private practitioners travelled over 200 kilometres to deliver legal aid services in regional communities. This was mentioned by the Attorney-General. But from my experience already in Bourke and Broken Hill, I would imagine it's double that number. Over half of of practitioners surveyed had been engaged in legal aid matters for more than a decade. Whilst the results of this report demonstrated that our private practitioners have a remarkable and enduring commitment to our system, I also acknowledge that it reveals some very hard truths about our current legal aid system. The report highlights that our workforce are under an incredible great deal of pressure with increasing workloads. It also exposes serious concerns about the high levels of unpaid work being completed in the private sector. This has resulted in some practitioners planning to leave the profession altogether and firms no longer taking legal aid commissions due to the pressure it places on their solicitors. The Law Council of Australia has indicated that across a range of family law, property and parenting disputes, payments received from legal aid matters are just 25 to 30% of what would otherwise have been received had the same matter been taken on privately. Lawyers undertaking this work have indicated that they feel they are working beyond capacity. They undertake this vital legal work because they can see the benefit it has for their communities, not for financial gain. However, this does not reduce the strain they are feeling due to the additional workloads. In fact, what shocked me when I saw the figures that legal aid, I probably shouldn't say this, but I was left practice almost 10 years ago to go into Parliament. And the figures of what we were paid in legal aid then have barely changed after 10 years. It shocked me. I read the report a second time, that page, because I didn't think it was right. It's something we need to face. This report highlights the need to reflect on how we can better support private practitioners and implement timely and decisive steps to improve legal aid commissions. The work of private practitioners has never been as important as it is now. In conclusion, on behalf of the Minns government, the Minns Labor government of New South Wales, I would like to thank legal aid private practitioners for granting greater access to justice to achieve timely and equitable outcomes for the people of New South Wales. I want to thank Legal Aid New South Wales and our private practitioners supporting legal aid and community legal centres across New South Wales for your enduring commitment to equity and justice. And beyond that, beyond my state role, I'd like to thank legal aid throughout this country, South Australia and Victoria and other places and nationally for the incredible work you do across the country. In this room today and online, we are fortunate to be surrounded by practitioners who, in their careers, have not lost the vital motivation of achieving equity and access to justice for vulnerable members of our community, but have carried it forward throughout their professional lives. In my personal opinion, those who practice social justice law, like yourselves, are swimming upstream, while others are on their way down. We recognise this and we thank you for your ongoing fight and commitment to achieving timely, just and efficient outcomes for all persons involved in the New South Wales and Australian legal system. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McDermott, for those strong words of support. We certainly sometimes do feel like we're swimming upstream or heading uphill, but it is for the greater good. And we also thank the attorney, the New South Wales attorney, for his support of Legal Aid New South Wales and of New South Wales private practitioners who undertake legal aid work. So thank you very much. It is now my pleasure to introduce Associate Professor Natasha Cortis and Dr. Megan Blaxland from the Social Policy Research Centre. Natasha and Megan are the authors of the report that we are launching today and have done a fabulous job in not just designing the census, but putting together a really clear and very compelling report that we are launching today. So thank you.
Thank you so much for those beautiful words of support and for the introductions today. So Megan and I will be co-presenting And we'd like to firstly acknowledge that we're on unceded Gadigal land here today. We pay respects to elders past and present, to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today, and all those working in the legal aid system to close the gap. Megan and I are extremely grateful to the team at National Legal Aid, which is quite a fabulous and unique team who have been very supportive through over many months that we've been putting together this work. We're really grateful to the Legal Aid Commissions for supporting us, and our fabulous project advisory group who helped in so many ways. Were very patient with us as we went through our learning curve about this system, and who helped make the research happen. And we're, of course, extremely grateful to the more than 1,000 private practitioners who shared their views. Now, we were warned in advance that practitioners would have quite a lot to say. I have to say they didn't disappoint at all. In the report, there's simply, there's just a mountain, an absolute mountain of information, and we had to make difficult choices about what went in. So that you'll hear the voices of practitioners in every jurisdiction, cities, regions with different specialisations, some new to legal aid, some who have been doing it for decades, all very accomplished professionals committed to justice. Today, we can just give a glimpse of our findings. There's so much more in the report. We hope it's really useful for you in understanding who private practitioners are, also celebrating private practitioners, and ultimately moving policy and practice forwards so that this important part of the legal aid system, this important part of the legal aid workforce, can be developed and sustained. Thank you. Now, this was an initiative, an initiative led by National Legal Aid, and we set out to understand private practitioners' characteristics and views, so a sense of their demographics and also their experiences of doing legal aid work. We designed the questions in consultation with National Legal Aid and our hugely helpful project advisory group. We're really grateful for the Legal Aid Commissions for helping with the recruitment. So we reached participants, private practitioners, through the Legal Aid Commission. They forwarded information about the census and an invitation to participate to all practitioners on their panels or their preferred supplier lists, or who had been in the last 2 years. Law societies and law councils also informed their networks, and we're really grateful for them as well for bolstering the reach of the study. So it was open for 4 weeks last August, and we had 1,010 practitioners participate in that time. It was a real priority of ours to capture practitioners' voices in their own frames and in their own terms, including about what was working well and not so well in their legal aid work. And our design was approved by the University of New South Wales Human Ethics Panel. So first of all, just in terms of who participated, around half said that they were a principal practitioner, 51%, 31% said they were lawyers or solicitors, 16% were barristers, and a very small number were in either another role or they didn't report their role. Thank you. And as mentioned today already, more than half were women. We found that among our participants, it was slightly more feminised than what we know about the wider legal profession from the ABS. Ours was about 59% female. ABS would indicate it's about 52%. What we found that was very interesting was the way the gender breakdown differs across age cohorts. So women are the vast majority of legal aid private practitioners in their 20s, 30s and 40s, and men are the majority in the older cohorts. And we think that this likely reflects the composition of the wider legal profession and its late feminisation. We don't think that low proportion of women in the older age cohorts is indicative of greater attrition of women from legal aid work. But this is something to keep an eye on in the future. Thanks. So as also mentioned earlier today, legal aid private practitioners tend to work in very small businesses. So here's a breakdown of responses to our question about the number of paid staff that were in their practice. So a third said just one. So a third are working on their own. 28% said there's in an organisation with 2 to 4 paid staff. And only 10% down the bottom there were working in practices with over 20 paid staff. So private practitioners predominantly in very small businesses. And that was something that surprised me when I saw the results. This is their years since their first legal aid case, many years, decades of engagement with legal aid. So a quarter have worked on their first legal aid case over 20 years ago, and a further 30% worked on their first case 10 to 20 years ago. Now, we don't know what private practitioners have been doing in the meantime. We don't know if they've been continuously engaged with legal aid since they're doing their first case, or how much legal aid work they've done. But either way, it suggests there's a lot of experience accumulated in this group, experience that we wouldn't want to be lost. We asked about the legal aid panels or lists that they were on. We gave a list of 14, and this is just the top 10 ranked by cases that they worked on. So 45% had worked on domestic and family violence cases, and 45% had worked on summary crimes, and lower proportions, or slightly lower, on other types of cases. And in terms of the panels or the types of panels they were on, the biggest was family law. So more than half of our private practitioners were on family law panels. There's much more detail in the report. Now, this slide shows the proportion working with each national priority client group in the last 2 years. So we asked which of the 11 groups they'd been working with. They selected 7.6 on average. And as we saw on the previous slide, over half were on a domestic and family violence panel, and 45% had worked on a family violence case. But here we can see that a much bigger proportion are working with people who are affected by domestic and family violence. So it's 88% there. And that was actually, we did a breakdown by age, and that figure was actually much higher, almost universal among practitioners in their 20s and 30s, which is that feminised part of the private practitioner workforce. So for those groups, working with clients affected by family violence is almost universal. Other groups most commonly selected were people with low education levels, single parents, and people with a disability or mental illness. Now, making a difference for these clients is something private practitioners find satisfying and enriching. It's the reason they do the work. But they're finding their work with clients is becoming much more complex. 74% of practitioners have seen the complexity of cases increase in the last 2 years. 72% have observed the client's need for non-legal services and supports has grown over the last 2 years. So this is things like homelessness services, mental health supports, drug and alcohol services. 65% have observed growth in the level of support required by clients to engage with legal aid. And 83% say the time that they need in order to engage with their legal aid clients has increased. I'm going to pass to my dear colleague, Dr. Megan Blackford now, to speak about legal aid caseloads.
Thanks, Natasha, and thank you, everyone. So we asked private practitioners about the amount of legal aid work that they do, and they do varied amounts of legal aid. 4% said that they were solely focused on legal aid. It was all of their caseload. And it was most of the caseload for about a third, and about half for a quarter of the private practitioners who answered the survey. 19% said it was less than half, and about the same said they just do the occasional case. And in the report, we provide some analysis showing that legal aid tends to be more prominent in the caseloads of practitioners working in small organisations. So amongst those, for example, 7% said that legal aid is all of their caseload and 39% said it was most of their caseload. And very small practices, those with 2 to 4 paid staff, tend to do a bit more than that. We also asked practitioners how much legal aid they would like to be doing and found that a third would prefer less legal aid work in their caseload. This is made up of 19% who said they'd like to do a bit less and 15% who want to do much less. And this is important, was mentioned earlier about people thinking about leaving the legal aid workforce, but those people who are wanting to do a bit less legal aid work is also something to be concerned about. However, the largest group said that they were happy with the current load of legal aid cases, about 40%, and another quarter actually want to do more legal aid cases, either much more or a little bit more. And this group generally report enjoying the work and they feel that they can accommodate it in their business model. But the group wanting less is nonetheless substantial and warrants attention. So practitioners were given an opportunity to tell us about their current caseloads, and these are some of the examples of things they've said. Among those who said they were happy with their current caseload, one, a principal from New South Wales, said, this is a sustainable amount, which allows my practice to remain funded by fee-paying clients. And another from the Northern Territory said, I enjoy the work, but the fees limit how much I can do. A principal from South Australia would like to do more legal aid work and said, I enjoy the independent children's lawyer work and I would prefer to do more, but the funding is insufficient and I need to balance the work with private family law work for the viability of my firm. So it's important to note here that even among those who are happy with the amount of legal aid work they are doing, or those who would like more, the value of legal aid grants was often raised as an issue which would limit the number of cases that practitioners take on. Next slide, thanks. So these are comments from practitioners who said they would like less legal aid work. A principal from Queensland said, legal aid work has taken over and it's not profitable. It is preventing the firm from taking on more profitable work and we need to reduce because it's not economical to be doing so much given the funding is so poor. Another explained, we're expected to do enormous amounts of highly stressful and traumatising work with compensation that doesn't come close to covering the work that is done. The profound impact on the mental health of professionals is not recognised. Private practitioners carry caseloads well in excess of double in-house legal aid employees and earn less. The system exploits junior lawyers, many of whom are women. So pretty sobering comments there, and there were more like that. And I guess it's not surprising that among this group who want to do less legal aid work, the value of the legal aid groups was the most prevalent concern. Throughout the survey, practitioners highlighted how funding effectively caps how much legal aid they can do, explaining that it is a key reason many wish to do less or shed their legal caseload altogether. When asked about if the amount of funding provided was a barrier to doing legal aid for their organisation, 70% said it was a significant barrier, and another 21% said it was a slight barrier. 85% told us that having to perform unremunerated work is a difficult aspect of legal aid work. And 77% said trying to do quality work with limited time and resources is a difficult aspect of their work. And 74% agreed with the statement, legal aid cases are costly for the organisation. However, while private practitioners are struggling with funding and many want to do less legal aid, 70% intend to still be doing some legal aid work in 12 months' time. Their reasons for wanting to continue reflect practitioners' strong commitments to social justice. They said things like this barrister in Western Australia, I like providing quality advocacy to Aboriginal clients and those in regional areas generally. Another from Victoria. I love the ICL work I do, and I'm the only practitioner within a 400-kilometre radius to be able to undertake the work. I value the role I have within the court circuits, and I know the bench also appreciate that work. But often here too, the commitment was tempered by financial considerations. Comments like this one were typical. The work itself can be rewarding, and it is a very good experience. It is just difficult to balance this in a firm where financials and billing is important. We asked private practitioners about their ideas about what could be done to improve the legal aid system, and they had many excellent suggestions. It's not surprising that many of these were strong calls for decent funding. Funding is what enables them to do legal aid work that they're committed to doing. They want to see proper funding for legal aid grants to make sure all the activities required are recognised and covered. But they also want to see better funding for legal aid commissions and the legal assistance system overall. And they want a properly resourced community service system so that clients can get the non-legal service supports that they need, for example, to address housing or health needs, so that when they meet with clients, they can focus on legal issues. There were other things too they thought would make the system work more efficiently. Some questioned why legal aid is weighted so heavily towards private provision and wondered if in-house staff could play a bigger role, helping with upfront paperwork, for example, or perhaps private practitioners could brief duty lawyers for some smaller appearances and then save on travel costs. They called for more efficient administration processes around grants, better communications with legal aid commissions, sometimes through better technology, but often by making it easier to talk with an individual grants officer and to get quick responses to urgent questions, and ideally someone who knew them. And they implored courts to allow more online appearances because some practitioners were spending long times travelling and waiting, which wasn't covered by their grants. And sometimes they would be really frustrated when they wouldn't then even appear at all. Other suggestions were for more in-kind supports, like for legal aid commissions to share library resources and databases with private practitioners, to provide mental health support and help with the vicarious trauma associated with legal aid cases, and to provide private practitioners with professional development opportunities that take place in convenient locations. There's so much more in the report. There's more on private practitioners of experiences of working with clients, which Natasha touched on, and working with legal aid commissions. There's sections on the satisfying aspects of the work and the parts that practitioners find difficult. And we break down the data by age and gender and jurisdiction and more. We're so grateful for the opportunity to do this work. We've enjoyed it enormously and it's been incredibly interesting. And we've really enjoyed helping give a voice to legal aid private practitioners in the many different contexts in which they work across the country. The report demonstrates the important contribution of this workforce. It shows that there is a huge amount of goodwill and commitment from private practitioners, but also that supply is not guaranteed. We hope that this project is a step towards understanding this workforce more so that their contributions can be better understood, valued and sustained into the future so that our legal aid system can be the best that it can be. And just if we go to the next slide, there's this link will take you to the report. And we encourage you to read it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natasha and Megan. We have time for questions. So we've got online possibilities of typing in the question box around questions, and then also obviously in the room too. We have a microphone. Is there anyone online who's...
We do have a question online. If there are any in person yet, which was more directed around alternate ways of alleviating the financial burden if there isn't sufficient state and federal funding, if the report like illuminated any
So it's not something that we specifically explored in the report. However, it was really clear in the comments that private practitioners made that some have found ways to make it work. And so we think that it could be a really useful exercise to spend some time with those people and find out what it is about the ways that they do legal aid work that makes it possible for them.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of diversity too in there. There's some that are making it work by really minimising the numbers of legal aid cases that they're taking on and being careful about the types of cases they take on. And then there's others that are making it work by taking on more, like a large volume as well. So I was really intrigued at the end of this study to think about, well, how are some making it work, and is there some learning there that can be transferred to other private practitioners about how it can actually work for the practice?
I'll just run up here.
I was just going to ask whether there's a plan to do a follow-up survey in a couple of years, or once some of the initiatives have been hopefully put into place to alleviate some of the concerns of the private practitioners.
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, it would be really great to follow up, whether it's a repeat of this or following up on some of the measures that you'd expect to change over time as I suppose, in response to any intervention. Definitely worth doing.
And we did design the census to be a baseline so that hopefully that change will be able to be seen.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to thank Natasha and Megan for your report. I think it's an excellent report. My name is Philip Roberts. I'm active within lawyers groups. I've been active since 2013 on the issue of practice viability for legal practices, particularly small practices. This is not an easy pitch. Small firms are not sexy. It's not easy to get response. But what you're doing in giving recognition to us, I think, is a very big step forward. We've been waiting for this type of thing for a very, very long time. And so thank you. I would like to make 2 points and welcome your response. I am also a sole practitioner, by the way, so I know exactly, and I do legal aid work. The first one is in relation to these issues, they don't occur in a vacuum. For small practices, the whole issue of costs and viability of practices is not just an issue about legal aid practice work. It's also an issue for other work, for private clients. We live in a society where so many people think that you can pay for a set of litigation with $100. They have no idea the amount of work that goes into this sort of thing. So it's a very important thing for people working in small practices. The second point is, it's not just, I've heard tonight the issue of the rates of pay. It's not just the rates of pay, it's also the amounts of tasks that are listed. And quite often, I've had experience once when I took on a family law matter, and I started, and I'd been on it for 6 months, and I thought I must have been through the whole list. I went back to my list, and I got to about 20% of the way through it. So, you know, I'm going, my goodness, this isn't anywhere near enough to sustain my practice. Fortunately, I'm continuing. So I'm interested in your response. I'm sorry that's long, but I have a strong involvement in this area.
Thank you so much. I'll just respond on the point about rates of pay, and that definitely in the survey we heard rates of pay, but also the scope of activities that legal aid private practitioners are expected to perform is much wider than is recognised by legal aid commissions, but also by the court. So they'll be often expected to do things which just wasn't paid for. So it is that scope of activity as well as the rate of pay.
Yeah, and I just wanted to comment on what you said about people's understanding about the law. And I mean, this is something not just that other people mentioned in the survey as well. And so we definitely had feedback saying it would be so helpful if legal aid clients understood better what they were coming into when they were, you know, starting in this process. And there was some suggestions that the legal aid commissions could maybe help establish some expectations with clients about what this might look like from the outset, and that might kind of help a little with that.
And I think that goes to the question of what are some of the solutions maybe that don't require a huge bucket of money. And this is about maybe some upfront work by legal aid commissions, educating clients so that they come in with realistic expectations to hit the ground, and the practitioners can then hit the ground running and do the legal stuff more efficiently.
Thanks for this outstanding report, very timely. I was really interested in the finding that 74% of practitioners said that the complexity of cases they're seeing has increased in the last 2 years, and also the need for non-legal supports. This is, of course, mirrored in our in-house practices as well at legal aid commissions. Just interested in your reflections on what is the nature of that complexity? What were private practitioners reporting to you, both in types of matters and the clients as well?
Got a whole section on that in the report. I can't remember.
That's okay. I'll talk about the non-legal supports while Natasha refreshes her memory about the huge detail we've got in the report on the other part. So part of the challenge for private practitioners doing legal aid is clients who just have a lot going on in their lives, and the community services sector, which would ideally be supporting them, is not being able to provide them with the support that they need. So, and if you're trying to work with someone who is homeless, for example, the lack of place to live is the biggest thing in their life. And it's very, very difficult then to get them to do the other things that as a lawyer, you might need them to do, like provide you with documents about, you know, they might not even have anymore, or just not be able to remember to find or whatever, because there's just too much else going on. So there was a lot of, also the practitioners really cared, like they cared that the people they were working with were struggling so much, and they wanted their lives to be, you know, those difficulties in their lives to be alleviated a bit. And so they would work hard to try and get them to access those other kinds of support services, mental health, you know, other health services, housing, food, like a huge range of things. They worked really hard on that, but they found it very time consuming to be doing that on top of providing legal assistance.
Yeah, we've got a whole section in the report that covers these issues. Some comments from lawyers saying that they felt clients actually lent on them for these types of supports because they couldn't find social work supports anywhere else, and they were really aware that their ability to help refer them to services or do some of that kind of social work type work, the outcome of the case could, you know, it could really affect the outcome of the case, that person had supports in place in all aspects of their life, whether it's health, housing, drug and alcohol supports, etc. Yeah.
Drug testing was one that came up a lot, actually, that, you know, clients needing drug testing, but they're not being anywhere that they could go to get that done, or afford to be able to go to get that done.
And this is, one of those other things that isn't about, as much as it's needed that the grant system needs to be improved, it's about, system design around the grant system so that clients get the supports they need in a way that takes the pressure off practitioners who can then focus on the legal stuff.
And in terms of the complexity of the cases themselves, from memory, a lot of that had to do with the courts. So there were things that were changing with the courts that meant that the private practitioners had to, do things differently, appear more often. The actual number of documents that people had to review was something that people mentioned a lot, that there's just a lot to read through and organise and understand, and not any kind of change in the kinds of funding that was available to give them time to read. Yeah. People mentioned just thousands of pages of documents. It was extraordinary.
Got a couple online questions as well. I'll throw you a couple at the same time. One was, what administrative burdens for private practitioners do you think legal aid could help with? Another was, were there any reflections in the report about the interactions and roles of in-house and private legal aid practitioners?
Again, on the administrative supports that legal aid commissions could assist with, there's a long section in the report. One of the things that so I was mostly responsible for reading people's comments in the analysis of this. So one of the things that came up a lot in the comments was around the way that grants are provided in stages. So you get a bit and then you get another bit, and there were often practitioners were often frustrated at delays at each stage of that, but nonetheless the case was going on, and so they had to keep acting to represent the person that they were working with, but they couldn't be sure that they were going to get the legal aid grant extended, and sometimes they didn't, and they'd already done an enormous amount of work for that person. So that's only one example, but there were many of those kind of reporting around funding and how do you spend the funding, and the kinds of activities in the list that you mentioned that you have to go through and say that you've done this and that one, and putting claims for different amounts on all of those different things. They found it very time consuming. And audit too was something that came up. And also that administration at the beginning of the case, making sure that the paperwork was all in place before the case was actually assigned to them, so that then they didn't have to go and chase that paperwork up in the beginning, and they could just get straight to the legal stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Information wasn't always shared. Even things like contact details and stuff, private practitioners found, changes weren't necessarily shared with them. So.
And in terms of interactions with duty lawyers, I think you asked about, there wasn't a lot, but one of the things that was mentioned was being able to draw on duty lawyers where there's a short appearance that doesn't make sense for the private practitioner to do a lot of travel or a lot of waiting for. So it made something very costly that perhaps they didn't need to be there, and duty lawyers might be able to be briefed to step in those situations.
And it just would seem like a much more efficient way to do things.
We had another question online. Just put your hand up if you have a question in here as well. Just on the kind of consequence of a high volume of legal aid work, possibly resulting in poor quality work, and what work could be done to look at the outcomes of legal aid work.
So we don't have any evidence about the outcomes of legal aid work. Certainly some of the practitioners were concerned that that by not being fully funded for all the activities they needed to do, the only way they could get through this volume is with a grind mentality, just, processing it as quickly and as efficiently as they could themselves, which isn't necessarily the, highest quality way to do legal aid work. It was the way that works for them. So they were concerned about that, but we don't necessarily have evidence about the outcomes or any measures of quality. It was really just their concerns about quality.
And there were certainly many, just as many people who said, I'm expected to provide legal assistance to the same standard as any other client, and I do. And so I'm not funded for it, but I do it anyway. So it would be an important thing to look at, but not something we couldn't.
Yeah, no, we did ask people what happens when the grant doesn't cover all the activities that they need to do in the case. And so often people just said, well, we just do it anyway. We wear the cost. So they're not committed to let that standard of quality fall. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natasha and Megan, and thank you so much for your report, because it really will provide an incredibly strong evidence base for us to continue our advocacy to get additional funding to be able to increase fees for private practitioners. So thank you for that really compelling report. I'd also like to just take this opportunity to thank Catherine McKernan and Fei Zhang from National Legal Aid for their terrific leadership in managing this project. And, it was sort of your brainchild, and thank you so much for making it happen. And as I said, I think it will be an incredibly strong evidence base for us. So thank you, Catherine and Fei. And thank you also to the representatives from all the legal aid commissions who are on the advisory committee, and also to the Law Council of Australia, who helped design the survey and helped us recruit private practitioners for the survey as well. Thanks for the enthusiasm and for the support for the project. I'd like to now introduce Mark Woods, Chair of the Access to Justice Committee of the Law Council of Australia, for his reflections on our response to this really important piece of work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monique. I'm here to prove that small practices are not sexy. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the Gadigal land, and with your leave, can I send greetings to where I come from, the Gunai-Kurnai country in Gippsland in Victoria, and the current custodians of that area, far too many of whom sadly are clients of my firm. I want to thank National Legal Aid. I acknowledge Catherine's great work and Fei's great work in really driving this process. As a legal aid practitioner in private practice, I must say it was nice to be asked what I thought for a change, instead of being told what I should do and how I should take every dollar that's in my till at reception and make it go further, which has been the lot of legal aid people in private practice for so many years. I also want to acknowledge the work of the University of New South Wales. It has a very proud history, and I wasn't a student there, but I know the work they do, the university that is in Access to Justice in particular. It's hosting of the National Pro Bono Centre, and that's been a feature of the legal assistance sector now for many years. When I first started doing legal aid work as a private practitioner in the 1980s, we had an agreement with the federal government which said that if we undertook work in the Family Court of Australia, then we would be remunerated at a rate which was 80% of the market rate, which was reflected in what were then called court scales. We were prepared to do that, and we were prepared to accept that 80% of something was worthwhile because we were achieving access to justice in the work that we did. Little did we know that several decades later, the proportions were not 80% of market rates, but 35%, going down to 25%, depending upon the sort of work that was being done. I'm not an economist nor an accountant, but you can see that that's unsustainable. And that's why Dr. Borsig says we are heading for a cliff. The legal aid system is hemorrhaging private practitioners. If the health minister announced today that 30% of doctors were going to leave the Medicare system, there would be an outrage. There'd be an uproar. And we wouldn't be needing to find $8 billion. which we can find apparently pretty quickly if the need arises. But what we need to find is significantly more. As the researchers have told us, 85% of us say, well, we do it because we make a difference in people's lives. We care about that. I'm not too sure the government does, and I'm not too sure that the opposition does, because the tradition of governments of whatever political persuasion over the last 30 years has been to say, do more with less. One of the telling anecdotes I thought was the Victorian principal, not me, I might say, who had done an analysis with his accountant of his practice, and he said that he found that legal aid took up 40% of his time, but only provided 3% of his income. How is that sustainable? How can that continue? I'm really pleased that the researchers have found that 3/4 of us have seen an increase in the level of complexity of cases over the last 2 years. And I'm even more pleased that they've been able to explain that that has 2 parts. The first is the clients themselves. We all know that legal assistance is only available to the most vulnerable, and therefore, almost by definition, they are going to be people with far more complex needs than those who are able to afford our services privately. And substance abuse, homelessness, mental health issues have been mentioned, and there are myriad others. The reality is that because the service sector, which is designed to give them somewhere to live, sort out their mental health problems, and counsel and deal with their substance abuse, are chronically underfunded as well. And because they don't work, when somebody needs to get bail, it takes a private practitioner twice as long to find the services that are going to be necessary to not only rehabilitate the person, but protect the community from that person when they're out on bail. But the other part of the complexity increase, might I suggest, is the fact that the legal system, the litigation system in whatever jurisdiction we're talking about, has increased in its complexity. The manifold changes to rules, not only in the family law system but elsewhere, just has to be seen to be believed. And the idea that we have one set of rules for everybody that litigates in those courts, irrespective of the resources available to them to undertake that litigation, is quite frankly just silly. And it's an affront to common sense for courts to expect that that's going to occur. I'm always amused when I get notifications from a court which deals with relationship breakdown that shan't be named, that says that the particular judicial officer expects that people will attend in person for what I know will be a 5-minute hearing. And my practice isn't all that remote. I can get to the Melbourne courts in an hour and a half. But for those clients who are 5 and 6 hours away, or their lawyers are, for a court to say, well, you know, we don't care if you're only being paid at legal aid rates, it just doesn't matter, you've just got to comply with the rules, is quite frankly a misunderstanding of what access to justice means. Obviously, there's the issue of administration, the question of timeliness of responses by legal aid commissions. And look, I'm the first to acknowledge that legal aid commissions around the country have worked tirelessly to attempt to bridge the gap between the need for private practitioners to have an effective means of communication to get some decisions made and the resources that are there to do it. I acknowledge that that's improved significantly, particularly over the last 5 or 6 years. The reality is, however, that we are still stuck as the meat in the sandwich. The court that says X has to be done by next Friday lunchtime, the client who says, my phone doesn't work and all of my records are on the phone, and the legal aid assignments officer who says, oh, we're not going to get to that until the end of the month, I'm so sorry. Somebody's got to sort that out. Somebody's got to be the circuit breaker. And that's what increases the complexity to which I've referred. 2/3 of us say that unmet legal need has grown during the course of the past 2 years. And it's important that we recognise that as those at the front line, we turn away people from the legal aid system. We're the triage. And as you have an increase in what the researchers have called the missing middle, because of the cost of living crisis and so forth, it's private practitioners who have to listen to the legal issues that they need to have resolved and then work out whether they've got too much dough to be eligible for legal aid. And if they are, well, that's someone who isn't caught by the statistics. And somehow we've got to muddle through and assist them one way or the other. You've heard the telling statistics about those who are intending to leave the legal aid sector. And it's frightening because those of us who will be left can't take on any more work. And I don't see, as I look out to other colleagues in the profession, another 30% of people who are prepared to say, well, that's all right, I'll put my hand up and away I'll go. That's simply not the way it works. So my reflections, Monique, really amount to three things. The first is we would like to see National Legal Aid and its constituent commissions continue to improve the administration, getting rid of the red tape, and in some cases, the unnecessary red tape. Let's talk about means testing, for example, and to talk to the courts and say, listen, you're expecting too much of the people that we've got on our panels when you want them to do that and you want them to do that lickety-split, whether or not they've got a grant of aid. Talk to those institutions that are causing enormous distress. Secondly, can I say to our courts, for goodness sake, give us a break. Understand the reality of acting. Most of you who are on the bench have done a bit of that yourselves. Don't forget it. Because if you do, those 30% are gone. And then we know what that's going to do to the court process. Talk to the legal aid commissions around the country, whether you're dealing with crime in your court or family law or family violence. But finally, there's funding. And let's not muck around. Mark Dreyfus, with the greatest respect, has been one of the great advocates for legal aid in this country amongst our several attorneys general that the Law Council has dealt with over the decades. But the reality is that there has been a lamentable failure to fund legal aid. You all saw the statistics. 484 million extra was needed and it didn't arrive. And you've also seen the research which says it makes good economic sense for the government to put that in. If it did, it would save 760 odd million in government services not required downstream. What sort of economic madness is it that the Treasury can't see? An investment in legal aid is good news for government and government services. The Law Council of Australia is really happy with its partnership with National Legal Aid in so many projects. Our work together on the Australian Legal Assistance Forum and elsewhere has been terrific. We're going to continue the fight for more funding because it's a government responsibility. And as someone who's there at the coalface, if we don't, we're going to lose so many people, and the big losers are going to be the Australian people. Our next big event, the National Access to Justice Conference, will be held in Melbourne in August. I encourage you to come along because these issues and these problems are going to be further explored and the advocacy continued. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks very much, Mark, for those really stirring reflections, and your support is always incredibly appreciated. So thank you so much. Before we close, on behalf of National Legal Aid and the Legal Aid Commissions, can I please just thank all the lawyers who took part in the survey for their thoughtful and extensive feedback on how we can improve our support for you to do legal aid work. That feedback is incredibly important to us, and each Legal Aid Commission will be using it to inform their work on improving support and the administration of grants and communication with private practitioners. In Legal Aid New South Wales, in fact, we are reviewing our fee scales in Commonwealth family and civil law, but we're also building a whole new legal aid application system. So we hope that 2025 and beyond will see big improvements in the way that we support private practitioners. National Legal Aid will also be developing an implementation plan to monitor implementation of changes responding to the findings of the census report. And we will be repeating the survey in 2 years' time. And I hope that in 2 years' time, and I'm sure you all hope as well, that in 2 years' time, we will see additional resources and improved support for all those who undertake the essential life-changing work that is integral to access to justice. So many thanks to you all for your commitment to supporting the most disadvantaged members of our communities. And thank you to for being part of this really, really important project for National Legal Aid. And thank you for your attendance today here and online. Thank you.